Maybe I have a few opening words, so I will give them while he's mic'd up. So the background of all of this is Repower EU. The European Commission has announced that, you could say, as a reply to the war waged by Russia in Ukraine, as a reply to the dependency on fossil energy. Morning. And we were very happy to see that in this communication we had 10 million hydronics additional heat pumps in the beginning until 2025, 2026, and 30 million additional hydronic heat pumps until 2030. We have done our own calculations because we said it's not only hydronic heat pumps, air-to-air heat pumps are important to remove fossil energy from heating and cooling, but also from hot water if they're combined with sanitary hot water heat pumps. The idea here is to say, how do we achieve these 30 million units? And hence we called the first session making the most sustainable heating options the most affordable. You can look at this from different angles. And Peter Liese's angle is at the moment to improve the cost of operating heating systems. And that was what he was really focusing on when he worked on the emission trading scheme. And I would like to understand from Peter, where do we stand today? There was a decision taken in the European Parliament, but the discussion is not over.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for the invitation, and sorry for being late. You know, the way from the Parliament to this place is even more complicated than I thought. Thomas and me were grown up in the same area. I live 15 kilometers from the place where he has been grown up. And I'm faster in his town by bicycle than I was from the Parliament to the Atomium. And the bad story is I also need to leave in time because the next appointment is waiting in the Parliament. But on the point, you know, heat pumps are a big part of the solution of the three major crises that we are facing in these weeks, months, and years. It's the extreme high costs of fossil fuels, and we shouldn't underestimate, you cannot even overestimate the problem, how many consumers are suffering now and how many companies are about to go bankrupt. So that is really serious. On the other hand, we are still financing the war in Ukraine. Since the war started, we paid about 100 billion for gas, oil, and coal, mainly for gas from Russia. This is much more than the 60 billion that is the military budget of Russia. And when you meet Ukrainians, I did so the day before yesterday, you are still challenged with, why don't you just stop it? And we saw a summer with a lot of droughts, forest fires, farmers are suffering, forests are dying. We see that the climate crisis is even worse than we thought. So we have to address all the three crises. In short term, there may be compromises necessary to burn more coal instead of gas. That will, of course, increase emissions. But in long term, technologies like heat pumps are the solution. And it's good that finally now everybody understood. But we need to work on how we can really make it happen. And yeah, you can always learn from the past. And I think there are lessons to be learned for politicians, including in my party, the CDU party in Germany. I was fighting in favor of technologies that make us less dependent from Russian gas for 15 years now. And unfortunately, I didn't have a majority either in my party, and it was even worse with the Social Democrats in Germany. They trusted in Putin, and that was a big mistake. But also, to be honest, the big heating companies were also very much promoting gas-based solutions. So 15 years ago, maybe the condensing boiler was a good thing because you could replace old boilers, but for more than 10 years, Thomas, me, and others were pushing the big industry to go away from fossil fuel-based systems to heat pumps. And really, also these big companies, like the politician, should say, sorry, we trusted Putin, we did the wrong thing, and we have learned our lesson that we really now need to promote carbon-free technologies, energy-efficient technologies like the heat pumps. And what for me now is the most important challenge for Europe and for the European Parliament is this Repower EU. There are a lot of positive elements promoting the heat pump and other technologies. And we have just decided in the Environment Committee of the European Parliament, the negotiators of all the political groups, that we support Repower, and we will also support from the Environment Committee. We are responsible for the emission trading system. We will create 20 billion euro from the ETS to promote the transition. And at the same time, this will help with the high costs of the ETS. Because when I say we have this huge problem with energy costs, this is valid for electricity. Electricity price is unbearable high. And when people change from a gas boiler to a heat pump or from a combustion engine to electric vehicle, and then they see the high electricity cost, then we discourage the innovation that we need. That's why also electricity cost needs to be addressed. We have just discussed this in the EPP group. We need to support industry, we need to support the consumers, but I think the support and the mitigation of the price should be even more ambitious in electricity than in gas and oil, because in the long run, gas and oil we need to get rid of, but electricity is the fuel of the transition. And this operation that we decided on Monday to take the ETS to create 20 billion will bring the carbon price down, which means electricity consumers have a little bit of breathing space now. And that's why I like it. Greens, socialists and others said, oh, this is a disadvantage and we should mitigate that. I think that's what's needed. It's needed for consumers, it's needed for industry that is about to go bankrupt, but it's also needed because electricity is the fuel of the transition. On the other hand, at least in the long run, and I don't mean this year, next year, we still need the price signal that fossil fuels are the problem. They are the problem of the crisis we are in. They are the problem with the war in Russia, that we finance it. And they are the problem for climate. And that's why I'm not willing to give up on the ETS too. We need to be very careful how we do it and when we do it. But people that drive big cars in Germany without a speed limit, that have big houses and do not think they could afford a heat pump, and they have big ships, they should feel the pressure someday. So this is not the time to start with it next year, but we are talking about the second half of the decade. And the system in Europe must be a system where people that decarbonize, also in the private area, are incentivized, and people that think they can use fossil fuels forever needs to be discouraged. And I think this is the way forward to address the three crises in the long run. Short-term adaptation is necessary, but the direction is fossil fuel technologies, and you are doing a big contribution here. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter Liese. And one additional question then. I think we speak from all of our hearts to say that electricity is the transition fuel. Indeed, that's true, and it has to be kept, or it has to be limited in price increases as much as gas is. But one more to the ETS, that was really your main focus over the past, I don't even know, 2 years at least. And it took a lot of effort, and I would say in the end, from our perspective, the outcome was not as expected. Without going into all the details, but do you think we will see the building sector in ETS in this foreseeable future, in this short midterm horizon that you paint?
Yeah, very good point. My problem was that a majority of the political groups in the European Parliament wanted no ETS for heating and road transport at all. Of course, we had this amendment, this position from the far right, from both right groups in the European Parliament. So Giorgia Meloni group, ECR, and Salvini group in the ID, but also Social Democrats, Greens, and the left had the same position, because they were in the wrong assumption that we can do a transition without addressing buildings. So I think it's just impossible. And of course, there are poor people which we need to support. But Thomas Novak told me the other day that people that have an average income of 10,000 euro a month told him they cannot afford a heat pump. So they cannot afford the high energy prices maybe now, but they should go for heat pump. They should have gone 3 years ago. So we need to encourage also the private sector and targeted support for those in need. I was forced to make this compromise in the parliament that we split commercial buildings and private buildings, and the private buildings should be exempted until 29 and also subject to another assessment and another co-decision. So I didn't really like it, but it was the only way to make the ETS2 survive. And now I'm going to the trilogue. Parliament is for this solution. Commission and Council is for a more comprehensive solution, including private buildings. And the fight will be the timing. So I'm ready to react to the Council and to the Commission to advance the time for private building. But the condition that my colleagues and me have to insist is that we have a strong social climate fund, much stronger one than the Council, and also more criteria. So the money shouldn't disappear somewhere. It should be really focused on those in need. And I hope that we can get a solution here with more ambition, a broader scope, but also more targeted support for those in need.
Very good. I think that leads over directly to Patrick, representing one of the big heat pump manufacturers in Europe. And I said already that you are about to invest significant amounts of money, both in research and in production capacities. You are all, I think we all are confronted with this question, when will these heat pumps become cheaper? So do you think that your doubling of capacity will help to bring a more affordable product into the market, or is that the wrong question?
It's definitely an understandable question. So I wouldn't say it's a wrong one. And to some extent, of course, economies of scale will play a role. To what extent exactly, I think it's difficult to say, knowing that core components of heat pumps are already used in many other applications and many other devices. So you cannot just compare the number of heat pumps today with the number of heat pumps, say, by 2030, and therefore make a simulation based on that. But surely there will be an impact, also because standardization will come more. I think today we still have an awful lot of really fine-tuned heat pumps, case-by-case type of applications. The more we can standardize, for sure, this will have a huge benefit and ultimately will come back into affordability. Another key factor in there is, I would just call it stability. The fact that you are able to produce the same unit over a certain period of time will definitely also help to control better on scalability of manufacturing facilities, which again will then turn into higher economies of scale. So really those two things, on one hand side, standardization will definitely play a positive aspect. And the second part is stability. So the fact that we would be able to continue with the units for a certain period of time, and thereby being able to step by step improve the productivity in the factories is a major game player. Yeah. And we're not at that level yet. So I think that's what we will plan to see happening in the next couple of years.
But luckily, you're not alone. We have made an analysis on publicly available information. About 4 billion euros are about to be invested in the next 2.5 years in Europe. So really creating jobs and perspective, as I like to say. Martin, you're both representing consultancy and a body with a lot of research knowledge, but also WBCSD. Do you think, how would your members answer to this question? What could make heat pumps cheaper? And I know that you just published a white paper on flexibility. So is that something on the OpEx side that could help?
Indeed, indeed. Thank you. So first of all, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. We're together in a proton, and for the physicists amongst us, they know that protons consist of quarks, we're all the quarks here, and gluons. And those gluons are the binding glue that keeps us together. And let's not only make talk bind us together, but also all the market opportunities and the joint future that we're seeing here binding us together. Indeed, I work for DNV, and with DNV we are active across the entire value chain, so also buildings and the urbanized world. But WBCSD is a member association of large industrials at a global scale. And it's industrials that want to see a more sustainable future and also invest in this. And WC sees it as its purpose to actually pave the way and to be guiding towards all their members of what business opportunities are and how those business opportunities are changing. And that's indeed the background of why we wrote a few papers now on heat. And industrial heat, so I will talk about industry mostly and not so much the urbanized environment. Industrial heat consumes 30% of the world's total energy demand. So that's huge. And if we are successful in decarbonizing that, we solve quite a big part of the puzzle that we have together. To a large extent, almost half of that industrial heat demand is of moderate temperatures. And in industry scale, that means temperatures up to 500 degrees. So this is an area where heat pumps in their new developments can actually play a role going forward. And that means direct electrification in most cases for industrials. So there with direct use of available renewable sources. So direct decarbonization impact. But also it creates flexibility for the industry by direct hybrid solutions. Very often there is a gas boiler already available. If you add a heat pump or an e-boiler, then obviously it gives some flexibility and therefore it does something to your security of supply as an industry. Now there are OpEx effects, of course, to that. So we see that especially in today's markets, extremely high gas prices, extremely higher carbon prices than we used to have a few years ago. We see that those business cases are slowly getting solid. And especially because from WBCSD, we also try to be guiding towards PPAs. So corporates signing direct offtake agreements with wind and solar developers. And we see that really growing. Now, obviously, you're really getting this together if you're also flexible in your energy use, but maybe a little more of that later. So that's the OpEx side of things. The CapEx side is a little bit more complex because nice technology, nice to be more sustainable, nice to have more differentiations of sources and to use the wind farm that is being built next door. But obviously, it requires quite an investment. And that's also why we also wrote recently another paper around heat as a service, where we see the newcomers in the market, ESCOs, energy service companies, that are stepping in and actually take the investment and not only therefore having an off-balance investment for that corporate, but also have a guaranteed delivery of heat. In a way that you could look back in the 80s, we had across Europe many industry clusters with its own utility company. So in a way, we're moving again in that direction, but then in I think a different setting. So lots of work still to be done, but those first two papers are sort of the starting point for this discussion among corporates to look more at heat pumps, and I think that that's a very good development.
Indeed, and that's really also a very good segue to what EDF is doing, or what we all hope EDF to be doing. So let's see if it's all the reality. electricity as the fuel of the transition. You are the major dealer of this fuel in this case. How are you addressing the aspect of flexibility by product offerings? Frederick, I don't know what you look.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for your question. Thank you also for the invitation, and I deeply regret not being present there in Brussels at the Atomium. So back to your question. EDF active in the deployment of heat pumps? Definitely yes, and that's not a very new situation. It lasts for a very long time now. We have a kind of triple promotion. That is to say that first of all, we are talking about institutional promotion. Because we are deeply convinced that if we want to achieve decarbonization objectives and carbon neutrality, we need to pay an effort in our day-to-day life. In France, the building sector, together with transportation, is one of the most emissive sectors. And heating and hot water are questions that need to be addressed. Did you know, for instance, that gas heaters and gas boilers and fuel boilers are responsible for more than 80% of the emission of the CO2 concerning the buildings sector? So that's precisely what we are trying to push, and it's the goal of EPBD and EED directives. And I would like to add that we are quite grateful to the European Commission on Repower EU that grew noticeably the objectives for heat pumps implementation. And therefore, I'm deeply convinced that at the end of the day, heat pumps will become the new standards for heating and hot water. That's the reason why we are actively promoting development of such a technology towards the public authority by supporting decarbonization trajectories, participating to working groups for subsidies and helps for the households. We are also involved in some pedagogy by participating to seminars in order to promote the development of such a sector. And last, we are also trying to develop those arguments in the press to share the message. Likewise, we are developing also commercial promotion. At EDF, you have to know that we are currently selling, installing, and maintaining heat pumps already. By the way, I'm currently working at the customers services and territories branch. So that means that we are selling energy services. We do have some subsidiaries in France in order to sell and develop those heat pumps on the whole French territory, but also in the rest of the country where we are present. For instance, in the UK, together with EDF Energy, our subsidiary, we are currently selling heat pumps, but also in Belgium, together with Luminous, or in Italy, together with our Italian subsidiary, whose name is Edison.
Frederick,
yeah, just to finish, and last but not least, we are also contributing to the industrial development of the sector, together with our R&D, where we are developing currently some new prototypes. For instance, we developed together with some industrials some very high temperature heat pumps for industrial purposes.
This is impressive. I have one precise question that probably everybody in this room has also. We will discuss at the Energy Council, or not we, but the Energy Council will discuss caps on electricity demand. 10% I've heard demand reduction, that's the aim, but also peak capacity shaving.
Mm-hmm.
You have mentioned quite impressively that the amount of work that you're doing in installing the heat pumps. Are these heat pumps that you install, are they ready to shave peaks from the normal load curve of a day?
Yes. In fact, you will see that it's already taken into account in a different scenarios. In fact, we do have a short-term issue concerning the current situation, together with the war in Ukraine, the problems on the nuclear fleet, and so on. That's on the short term. But I would like to talk about what is concerning the long-term basis. And you see that all the different scenarios made by the public authorities in France, or the TSO, the transmission system operator, or even the distribution system operator, they all show that there will be a huge reduction on energy consumption by 2050, from 1,600 terawatt hour nowadays to 1,000 terawatt hours in 2050. But at the same time, the consumption of electricity will remain relatively stable, from 480 terawatt hour to 550 terawatt hour. And that, despite the fact that there will be a lot of development of new uses of electricity. That is to say, for instance, electric vehicle, but also electrification in the industry, but also heat pumps and so on. What does it mean? It means that, in fact, there is a kind of double flow. That is to say, on one side, a development of the uses, but at the same time, a sort of sobriety concerning the consumption of electricity. And by the way, with the COP of our current heat pumps and so on, the consumption of electricity will remain relatively stable. And if you add to that we plan to change electric heating by heat pump and so on, it will show you that at the end of the day, the whole consumption will remain relatively stable.
So that's an assuring confirmation. The lights will stay on even with 50, 60 million heat pumps. Let's come back to this idea of energy demand and reduction thereof. Peter, you mentioned that some of the commercial players in the market also suffer quite a bit from the energy price increases. Is there any type of support that you envision for small and medium-sized companies? We hear a lot about bakeries, breweries, these type of buildings. They could have shifted to heat pumps. I guess they were tricked a little bit into believing that cheap gas is enough, so they didn't have to do any more. But are they now getting more alerted, and will you help them?
Yeah, that's a real challenge. I think we need to make companies alive, small and big. I had a meeting yesterday with many experts, including the CEO of the chemical industry, Cefic, and he told me that BASF is planning the biggest heat pump ever for the industrial production. So this is something we desperately need to support, and that's why also the electricity price is so important, that it doesn't go through the roof. So the problem is they should have done it earlier. I'm pushing BASF for many, many years to decarbonize, and they thought they could rely on Russian gas. And they are in particular guilty for this policy. They personally intervened with all the German government and commission officials to trust on Russian gas. But on the other hand, there are many people that work with these companies, and we need the basic material. Without the basic material from the chemical industry, all the economy will go down and nothing will be possible. So we need to help them to survive the next winter, but also based on a long-term perspective that goes to this decarbonization. And with the SMEs, it's the same, you know. I'm coming back to our hometown. I was born even in the same town like he, Olsberg. My brother has, in the same hospital, my brother has a bakery there. And he invested a lot in photovoltaic, but still he's incapable to pay the bill. And now he's telling me two things. So I'm going to get bankrupt if I don't get support, but please recognize that I have already done this investment and others didn't. But the problem is, the more targeted you will try to do it, the more complicated it is. And while you have sorted this out, all these companies, big and small, are already bankrupt. So we need to be a bit pragmatic. There needs to be also maybe loans for poor people. We need direct income support for companies. Loans are maybe better served because then you also see who has a long-term perspective and who is just getting the money and go bankrupt anyhow because he has no plan for the future. It's a hell of a job, but it needs to be fixed fast, as just as possible, but also as fast as possible.
And the really big difficulty will be to deliver all the units that could help. I mean, like even if your brother would have wanted a heat pump just now because he was a bit forward-looking and ordered it in March, Patrick, how quickly will we see increased capacities in the market? The investment will have a lead time.
Indeed, yeah. Building a factory takes time. Building walls especially takes time. But I think with all the manufacturers around the room today, even within the existing premises, there's still a lot we can do. So I think just this year, we practically increased production capacity with about 50% in 1 year time. So a lot can happen in between before, let's say, the new mega factories that some of us here are planning are coming onto line, which will be towards 2025 onwards, actually. So the production is ramping up, but there's more to that. The fact that possibly your brother can get a heat pump is one, maybe the unit itself, but possibly more important, the installer. And that's the next part of the game. It's also down to us to together with companies like EDF, to train installers. And I'm happy to see that partnerships are being developed to actually be able to do that. To scale up the installers, to remove the fear that some of them still have of not installing a boiler and installing a heat pump. This is still there. There's averages that say in some countries 30% of the installers can do heat pump. Other countries it's 10%, others it's even 5%. So there's a lot still to be done there to make sure that the installation capacity is geared up. And then again, coming to innovation and R&D, it's down to us as manufacturers to make them more easy to install, to make them more faster to install, which then again will solve possibly part of the question about affordability, because next to the unit, the install cost is also a big part of the game. So tackling all of that and almost circling the point we will be able to deliver, and we will have to work together. And again, that's where this accelerator can come, because a lot of stakeholders are involved to be able to solve the puzzle.
If we talk about affordability, heat as a service could be a quick way out, right? I mean, you mentioned flexibility, Martin. Is flexibility the basis of heat as a service, and is that used also in industrial applications?
Well, the basis of heat as a service is, of course, a financial arrangement. So flexibility can be part of that, but that obviously doesn't solve supply chain and labor-related issues, because you just move the problem to a different type of company, namely the ESCO. But so I leave it to others to comment on supply chain bottlenecks and so on. But there obviously is also the element of the grid. Can we connect all this power? Yes, in total, we may have sufficient generation capacity to meet this new power demand, because we're installing rapidly wind and solar all across Europe. But are we not getting congestion issues at local scale? And that's something that we see actually close by here. The Belgian grid, the Dutch grid are getting quite congested. If you look at the color maps of where you have still connection capacity available, they're turning rather red. And then here we are already in quite a densely electrified world with a rather strong grid. If you look at a country like Poland, nowadays fantastic ambitions on wind. But how do we get all this wind to those consumers? And I think the answer there is to join forces across that value chain. Local generation meets local demand. And what does that mean? Is demand then able to scale with generation? Should all this demand be connected in N-1 safe way? Or not necessarily, because we may still have some hybrid setups. An industrial who has run gas boilers for years, maybe this gas boiler can stay there for moments when power prices are peaking and not a lot of local renewables are available. And so I think that we're looking also technically around designs and local solutions that actually bring this flexibility in again.
Thank you. I see we have 2.5 minutes left. I see also that the other speakers are mic'd up as we speak, so maybe we have 30 seconds more. Is there any questions in the audience that needs to be raised at this point in time? Savina, can you just give me a hint? The mic sets, do they have to be exchanged while we are going off stage to the new people, or do you have a second set that is done now? Sorry? Okay, so we can speak a little bit more. Because then I would ask that question to Frederick, actually. I mean, I guess it's the most uneasy question to you. In the current situation in France, but also in Europe, we see the day-ahead prices. The day-ahead prices are really a challenge, if not even to say a disaster. Will we have enough capacity, both on the generation side and on the distribution side? And how quickly can we follow the increasing demand for electric technologies from your perspective?
As I told you previously, we do have some constraints in the coming winter due to the general situation, due to some issues on the nuclear fleet and so on. So that's for the next winter. Concerning generation, but we do hope that on longer term or the medium term, we will be in the correct position in order to tackle with all of them. Concerning the demand, and I wanted to say that I totally agree with the previous panelist. There will be also eventually an issue concerning the distribution grid, but what we see in France, and it's not EDF who say that, but the TSO and the DSO, they are all saying that more than 50% of the coming investment in the next future in order to reinforce the grid will come not from new demand use, but will come from the integration of new renewables and so on. More than 50% of the new substations will be designed for injection rather than for demand. So I'm pretty confident on the demand side and the answer of the grid for the time being, even if we will have to make some investment in order to be able to welcome all the new generation in the coming years.
Wonderful. Now we are really slightly over time, but I think it's a very good closing. We need to reinvest into the grid. We need to reinvest into industry. We have heard that basically the technology is ready. The European Parliament and the co-legislator is helping to put heat pumps on a more economically interesting footing. We see the need for new services based on flexibility and others. And in my opinion, this reiterates and underlines the need for this cooperation platform. Call it an accelerator, call it a platform, call it a forum. Maybe we need a new forum like the Madrid Forum similarly, so that there is something that makes us meet every year, as Patrick said it so nicely, to check if we are on track for the fast transition that we have ahead of us. Thank you very much. And we will move over to the next session that will talk about the end user experience and the consumer association interest. Peter, Martin, Patrick, Frederick, thank you very much for the interesting discussion and enjoy the rest of the day.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.